I remember how the sunlight streamed through the classroom windows that spring afternoon. The dust particles danced in the air, creating beams of light that seemed almost magical. I was 12 years old, sitting at my desk, legs swinging beneath me because my feet couldn't quite reach the floor yet. My heart was beating so fast I thought everyone around me could hear it. Mr. Peterson stood at the front of the classroom, holding a stack of papers. Our short stories from the annual writing competition. His gray hair was neatly combed to the side, and his tweed jacket had those leather patches at the elbows that made him look like he belonged in some fancy university instead of our middle school in the late 1980s. "I've reviewed all your submissions," he said, scanning the room with those pale blue eyes that always seemed to look past me rather than at me. "And I must say, we have some talented young writers among us." I straightened my back and folded my hands on my desk. I had poured everything into my story about a girl who discovered she could hear people's thoughts, but only when they were telling lies. Mama had always told me I had a gift with words, just like my grandmother before me. Writing came as naturally to me as breathing. "The winner of this year's writing contest," Mr. Peterson continued, pausing for effect, "and recipient of the scholarship prize to attend the young writers' summer workshops." The room fell silent. I held my breath. James Wilson. My heart sank. James, who sat 2 rows ahead of me, jumped up with a whoop. He high-fived the boys around him as he made his way to the front of the class. I blinked back tears. I was sure, so sure, that my story was better than anyone else's. Not out of arrogance, but because I had felt it in my bones when I wrote it. That rare feeling when the words flow through you like they're coming from somewhere else. As the bell rang and students began shuffling out, I gathered my courage and approached Mr. Peterson's desk. "Excuse me, sir," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I was wondering if I could get some feedback on my story. I really thought I worked very hard on it." Mr. Peterson barely looked up from organizing his papers. "Your writing showed promise, Evelyn, but it wasn't quite what we were looking for this year. Could you tell me what I could improve for next time?" I persisted. He sighed, finally looking at me. "The winning entry needed to demonstrate sophisticated literary techniques and original thinking. Your story was adequate, but it seems beyond your usual capabilities." I frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "Let's be honest, Evelyn. Someone must have helped you with this. The vocabulary, the structure. It's clearly not entirely your own work." The accusation hit me like a slap. "No one helped me, Mr. Peterson. I wrote every word myself." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Really? Because your classroom work doesn't reflect this level of eloquence. It's nothing to be ashamed of, getting a little help. But for competitions like this, we need to ensure fairness." Hot tears prickled behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I've always loved writing, sir. I read books all the time. That's where I learn words. I'm sorry, Evelyn, but my decision is final." He turned away, dismissing me. James earned this award fair and square. I walked home slowly that day, my backpack feeling heavier than usual. The dogwood trees lining our street were in full bloom, their white petals occasionally drifting down to the sidewalk, but I couldn't appreciate their beauty through my tears. When I reached our modest 2-story house, I found Mama in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The familiar scent of her famous chicken and dumplings filled the air. But even that couldn't lift my spirits. "There's my little writer," she said with a smile that quickly faded when she saw my face. "Baby, what's wrong?" The dam broke. Between sobs, I told her everything. About losing the contest. About Mr. Peterson's accusation. About how unfair it all felt. Mama listened quietly, her hands stilling on the rolling pin she'd been using for the dumplings. When I finished, she wiped her hands on her apron and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Listen to me, Evelyn Marie Johnson," she said, her voice low and intense. "That man doesn't know the first thing about you or your capabilities. You have been stringing together stories since you could talk." She pushed a strand of hair behind my ear. "Your grandmother was a storyteller. I'm a storyteller. And you got that gift doubled. You understand me?" I nodded, drawing comfort from her certainty. "Now, do you still have your story?" she asked. I nodded again, pulling the slightly crumpled papers from my backpack. Mama took them gently and said, "Let me read it, and then we'll figure out what to do next." That evening, after dinner, Mama asked me to bring her my school notebook and all my previous writing assignments. She spread them across the kitchen table, alongside my contest story, her face growing more determined with each page she read. "Tomorrow," she said finally, "I'm going to have a conversation with Principal Williams." I felt a flutter of hope mixed with fear. "What are you going to say?" "I'm going to tell him the truth, that my daughter is a gifted writer who deserves recognition, not baseless accusations." She squeezed my hand. "And I'm going to bring proof." The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. Mama had me put on my best dress, the yellow one with the white collar that we usually saved for church, and she wore her navy blue suit, the one she wore for important occasions. "Remember what I always tell you," she said as we walked to school. "You hold your head high and speak your truth. The rest will follow." Principal Williams's office was small but tidy, with certificates covering one wall and a large window overlooking the playground on the other. He greeted us with a professional smile, but I could see curiosity in his eyes. "Mrs. Johnson, Evelyn, what can I do for you today?" Mama sat straight-backed in her chair, her voice calm but firm. "We need to discuss the school writing contest and why Evelyn's work was disqualified on the false assumption that she couldn't have written it herself." Principal Williams frowned. "I wasn't aware of any issues with the contest. Mr. Peterson has been running it for 15 years without any complaints. Then this is long overdue," Mama replied, opening the folder she'd brought. "Here are Evelyn's writing samples from the past 3 years. Book reports, creative writing assignments, stories she's written at home. All in her handwriting, all showing consistent style and vocabulary." She laid them out one by one on his desk. "My daughter reads at a high school level, Mr. Williams. She's been writing stories since she was 7. Her grandmother was a published poet in our community newsletter, and I studied English literature in college before I had to drop out to support my family." I watched, amazed as my mother advocated for me, with a passion and eloquence I hoped to one day possess. Principal Williams examined the papers thoughtfully. "These are indeed impressive, Mrs. Johnson. But Mr. Peterson is an experienced educator with a background in literature himself. I'm sure he had his reasons." "His reason," Mama interrupted, "was that he took one look at my daughter and decided she couldn't possibly be capable of sophisticated writing. Now, we both know what that means, but I'm too dignified to say it out loud in front of my child." The room fell silent. Principal Williams shifted uncomfortably in his seat, then looked at me. "Evelyn, did Mr. Peterson specifically tell you that your work was disqualified?" I swallowed. "He said someone must have helped me because my classroom work doesn't reflect the same level of eloquence as my story. But that's not true. I just work harder on things I care about, like the contest. And I read all the time. I learn words from books. Principal Williams nodded slowly. I see. Well, this is concerning. The contest guidelines state that entries should be judged anonymously to prevent any bias. Were they? Mama asked pointedly. The principal's hesitation was answer enough. I think, he said finally, that we should revisit the judging process. Would you be willing to leave Evelyn's writing samples with me? I'd like to review them, along with her contest entry. Mama nodded. We'd also like to request that an external judge review the entries, someone with no connection to the school or its students. That seems reasonable, Principal Williams agreed, looking somewhat relieved at the suggested solution. Give me a few days to arrange this, and I'll be in touch. As we left the office, I felt lighter than I had in days. Mama might not have solved everything yet, but she'd made someone listen. She'd made them see me. Did I do the right thing? I asked as we walked home. Mama's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. You stood up for yourself and your work. That's always the right thing, Evelyn. The next few days at school were awkward. Mr. Peterson barely acknowledged me during classes, and some of the other students whispered when I walked by, having somehow caught wind that I was challenging James's win. James himself avoided looking, at me entirely. 3 days after our meeting, Principal Williams called me to his office during lunch. To my surprise, Mama was already there, along with a woman I didn't recognize, who was introduced as Dr. Coleman from the local community college's English department. Evelyn, Principal Williams began, Dr. Coleman has reviewed all the contest entries without knowing the names or identities of the writers. She's reached a conclusion about the winner. Dr. Coleman, a tall woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked black hair, smiled at me. Evelyn, your story about the girl who could hear lies was extraordinary. The character development, the metaphorical representation of truth-seeking, the resolution that emphasized personal integrity. It showed remarkable insight and literary skill. My heart began to race. After careful consideration, Principal Williams continued, we've determined that your entry should have won the contest. The scholarship to the Young Writers' Workshop is yours. Joy exploded inside me, but it was quickly tempered by another thought. What about James? It's not his fault. The adults exchanged glances. James has been informed of the situation, Principal Williams said. He'll receive an honorable mention and a partial scholarship to the workshop as well. Relief washed over me. I didn't want to take something away from James. I just wanted what I'd earned. There's one more thing, Principal Williams added. The award ceremony is tomorrow afternoon. We'd like to present you with your certificate then, if that's acceptable. Mama squeezed my hand under the table. We'll be there, she said. That night I could hardly sleep. I kept imagining standing on the stage, receiving the certificate, proving to everyone, especially Mr. Peterson, that I was exactly who I said I was, a writer. The next day crawled by minute until finally, it was time for the assembly. The entire school gathered in the auditorium. I sat with my class, my palms sweaty, while Mama sat in the section reserved for parents. Principal Williams opened the ceremony with a speech about excellence and integrity. Then he said something that made me sit up straighter. Today we're doing something a little different. Before announcing our winner, I've invited last year's judge, Ms. Roberts, from the public library, to say a few words about the judging process. Ms. Roberts, whom I recognized from my frequent library visits, stepped up to the microphone. When judging a writing contest, we remove all names from the entries to ensure impartiality. We look solely at the quality of the writing, the originality of the ideas, and the emotional impact of the story. This year's winning entry exemplified all these qualities. She nodded to Principal Williams, who continued, "This year's Young Writers Award goes to Evelyn Johnson for her story, The Truth Listener." The applause was scattered at first, then grew stronger. As I stood up, I caught sight of Mr. Peterson in the side wing of the stage. His face was a mask of controlled displeasure. Walking to the stage felt like floating. Principal Williams handed me the certificate with a smile, and Dr. Coleman presented me with an envelope containing information about the summer workshop. "Would you like to say a few words?" Principal Williams asked quietly. I hadn't prepared anything, but as I looked out at the sea of faces, some confused, some supportive, some indifferent, I knew what I needed to say. "Thank you for this honor," I began, my voice shaky at first, but growing stronger. Stories have always been my way of understanding the world. My grandmother told me that writing is like breathing. If you keep doing it, you get better at it, without even trying. I took a deep breath. I want to thank my mother, who taught me that your voice matters even when others try to silence it. And I want to thank everyone who believes in giving all stories a fair chance to be heard, no matter who tells them. As I stepped away from the microphone, the applause was louder this time. Mama was on her feet, tears streaming down her face, clapping harder than anyone. After the ceremony, as students and parents mingled in the auditorium, Mr. Peterson approached us. His face was tight, his smile forced. "Congratulations, Evelyn," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It seems I misjudged your capabilities." Before I could respond, Mama stepped forward. "Yes, you did," she said evenly. "But what matters is what happens next. Will you remember this the next time you look at a student and make assumptions about what they can or cannot do?" He flushed slightly. "Mrs. Johnson, I assure you, I treat all my students with the same high expectations." "Do you?" Mama interrupted. "Because expecting less from some students than others isn't just unfair. It's harmful. It tells them there's a ceiling to their dreams that others don't have." Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable. "I understand your concern, but it's not a concern," Mama said firmly. "It's a reality that my daughter lives every day. All I ask is that you think about that reality the next time you're tempted to assume what someone is capable of, based on how they look instead of what they actually do." For a moment, I thought Mr. Peterson might argue further, but something in Mama's steady gaze stopped him. He nodded curtly and walked away. "Did I push too hard?" Mama asked quietly after he left. I shook my head. "You pushed exactly enough, like you always do." The Young Writers' Workshop that summer changed my life. For 2 glorious weeks, I was surrounded by other kids who loved words as much as I did. We wrote every day, attended lectures by published authors, and gave each other feedback on our stories. My workshop mentor, a novelist named Ms. Langley, took a special interest in my writing. On the last day, she pulled me aside. "Evelyn, I want you to promise me something," she said, her dark eyes intense. "Promise me you'll keep writing, no matter what. Your voice is unique and necessary." "I promise," I said solemnly. "Good. Because the world needs stories from people like you. People who see things differently and have the courage to say so." When 8th grade started that fall, I had a new English teacher, Ms. Davis, who encouraged my writing and recommended books that challenged me. Mr. Peterson still taught 7th grade, and sometimes I would catch him watching me in the hallway with an unreadable expression. By the time I graduated from middle school, I had won 3 more writing contests and had a short story published in a regional youth literary magazine. Each success felt like vindication, proof that Mama had been right to fight for me that day in Principal Williams's office. As the years passed, my passion for writing never diminished. I studied journalism in college, determined to tell stories that might otherwise go untold. I worked for several newspapers, then magazines, eventually becoming a features editor focused on highlighting diverse voices and experiences. It was in this capacity, nearly 25 years after that middle school contest, that I found myself back in my hometown for a story about educational disparities in rural schools. I was sitting in a coffee shop, reviewing my notes, when a familiar face caught my attention. An older man with thinning gray hair sat alone at a corner table, a stack of papers in front of him. Even after all these years, I recognized Mr. Peterson immediately. He looked smaller somehow, more fragile than the imposing figure of my childhood memories. Something compelled me to approach him. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was a need for closure I hadn't realized I still carried. "Mr. Peterson?" I said, standing beside his table. He looked up, confusion flickering across his face before recognition dawned. "Evelyn Johnson," he said slowly. "My goodness, it's been many years." "Yes, it has," I agreed. "Do you mind if I join you for a moment?" He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Please." As I sat down, I noticed the papers in front of him were student essays, marked with red pen. "You're still teaching?" I asked. "Part-time at the community college," he said. "Composition and introductory literature. After I retired from the middle school, I couldn't quite give it up entirely." I nodded, studying him. The years had softened, his sharp edges, but there was something else different about him, a weariness that hadn't been there before. "What brings you back to town?" he asked. "I'm working on an article about educational equity," I explained. "I'm a journalist now." A small smile touched his lips. "A writer, just as you always wanted. I'm not surprised." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history between us. "I owe you an apology, Evelyn," he said finally, his voice low. "What I did to you all those years ago was wrong. I've had a lot of time to reflect on it, and I'm deeply sorry." The directness of his apology caught me off guard. "What made you change your mind?" I asked. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Many things. Life has a way of humbling you." He paused. "But specifically about you. After you left our school, I kept track of your accomplishments, the way your writing continued to flourish, the awards you won in high school. I realized I had been entirely wrong about you, and I began to question what other potential I might have missed or dismissed in other students." He gestured to the essays in front of him. "These are from my basic composition class. Most of my students now are first-generation college students, many working multiple jobs while studying. I try to see the potential in each of them, not just the surface errors." I felt a surprising lump in my throat. "That's good to hear. Your mother was right, you know," he continued, "about what she said to me after the award ceremony, about the harm of low expectations. It took me too long to recognize that in myself. I thought about telling him how much his actions had hurt me back then, how many nights I'd doubted myself because of his dismissal. But looking at him now, I could see he already knew. I have something to show you, I said instead, reaching into my bag for a copy of the magazine I edited. I opened it to the editor's letter I wrote, each month. This issue focuses on young writers from underrepresented backgrounds. The scholarship program we started has helped over 100 students attend writing workshops similar to the one I attended that summer. He took the magazine, scanning the page with interest. "You've created something meaningful," he said. "Something that changes lives." "That summer workshop changed mine," I replied. "It showed me what was possible." We talked for nearly an hour about writing, teaching, and the ways both had evolved over the years. As I prepared to leave, I noticed him gathering his papers with slightly shaky hands. "Are you heading home?" I asked. "No, to the library," he said. "My apartment is being fumigated today, so I need somewhere to work. Unfortunately, I missed the bus earlier, and the next one isn't for another 2 hours." I hesitated only briefly. "I have my car. I can drive you there." Surprise crossed his face. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to impose." "It's no imposition," I insisted. "Consider it my contribution to the future students who'll benefit from your feedback." As we drove to the library, Mr. Peterson mentioned he was developing a creative writing program for the community college, focusing on students who might not see themselves as traditional writers. "I'd like to include more diverse reading materials," he said. "Writers who approach storytelling from different cultural perspectives. Do you have any recommendations?" I smiled, thinking of all the authors who had inspired me over the years. "I have quite a few, actually. I'd be happy to send you a list." When we arrived at the library, I helped him carry his stack of essays inside. As we stood in the entrance, he turned to me with a sincerity I never would have expected from the Mr. Peterson of my childhood. "Thank you, Evelyn. Not just for the ride, but for this conversation, for allowing me the chance to apologize after all these years." "We all deserve second chances," I said, "and the opportunity to grow from our mistakes." As I drove away, I thought about how life sometimes brings us full circle in unexpected ways. That 12-year-old girl who had been told her words couldn't possibly be her own had grown into a woman whose words reached thousands, and the teacher who had once been an obstacle had become someone trying to clear the path for others. That night in my hotel room, I opened my laptop and began writing a new editor's letter for the upcoming issue. It was about the power of perseverance, about standing firm in your truth even when others doubt it, and about the unexpected teachers we meet along life's journey, even those who teach us by showing us what we don't want to become. I thought about Mama, who had taught me the most important lesson of all, that my voice mattered, that my stories deserved to be told. She had passed away 5 years earlier, but her influence remained in everything I did. The next morning, before leaving town, I stopped by the middle school where it all began. The building had been renovated, but the old auditorium still stood, now named after a local community leader. I stood on the stage where I had accepted that award all those years ago, where I had first spoken my truth to an audience. The empty seats seemed to echo with possibilities. Of all the young voices yet to be heard, all the stories yet to be told. As I left, I passed a bulletin board in the hallway announcing the annual writing contest. "All voices welcome," the colorful poster proclaimed. "Every story matters." I smiled, taking a photo of it with my phone. Some changes, at least, were for the better. On the flight home, I couldn't help thinking about how a single moment, a rejection, a challenge, a standing up for oneself, can alter the course of a life. I wondered what would have happened if Mama hadn't marched into that principal's office, if I had accepted Mr. Peterson's dismissal as truth. And sometimes I ask myself what you would do if you were in my shoes back then. Would you have spoken up? Would you have persisted? Or would you have let someone else define your capabilities? I believe that every one of us faces these moments of truth when we must decide whether to accept limitations others place on us or push beyond them. If my story resonates with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Someone facing doubt or dismissal. Someone who needs to be reminded that their voice matters. Because in the end, that's what all of our stories are. Reminders that we are here, that we see and feel and think in ways that are uniquely our own. And that the world is richer when all of us speak our truths. And remember, sometimes life brings us full circle in the most unexpected ways. The very person who once tried to dim your light might one day find themselves in darkness, needing the illumination only you can provide. When that moment comes, you'll have a choice to walk away or to show the compassion they once withheld from you. That choice, perhaps more than any other, reveals who you truly are.